Well, with week one in the books, Major League Soccer is officially back. Both Austin and their opponent this upcoming Sunday, Inter Miami, were both in action. We're joined by one of the voices of Inter Miami over there in the Sunshine State, in Chris Wittyngham. Chris typically has the radio call, but you may have already heard his voice on some national calls as well this past year. Austin FC fresh off a win over a fourth-year MLS side, now dabbling with another newcomer, third year for Inter Miami. Chris, great to have you with us. You, like me, you grew up in the backyard of your club that you get to be the voice of. You, Miami raised, went to Miami. What's it been like to see pro soccer return to your backyard after the fusion when you were pretty young disappeared?
Yeah, I have very vague recollections of the fusion as like a 7-year-old. I kind of remember what Lockhart Stadium used to look like before. I mean, really, you didn't go back except for the odd like Fort Lauderdale Strikers game here and there. But it's incredible. It's great to have soccer back in Miami. I remember, the first game that I did was actually during pandemic times, and it was still this huge kind of outpouring for me. The fact that, number one, I've been doing soccer on so many platforms and never actually got to see the teams live, like so often calling games off TV, and then actually having soccer in Miami. And then as they started letting a few thousand in, I remember our first game where we let fans in was against Orlando. There was probably like 3,000 or 4,000 there. But even still, you feel the energy of like what the noises are supposed to feel like. Like you dealt with so many games where that's the fake soundtrack where like it's not responding to moments within the game. So it's like, oh, a hard tackle just went in and Miami won the ball, and the crowd gets up for it. If it's 4,000 people, it still sounds like 50,000 after what we went through during the pandemic. So yeah, it's great to see what that supporter section looks like in the opening weekend against Chicago Fire. And yeah, I mean, it's great to have soccer back in Miami. I love going to every game. Every time I stand on the field for like our pregame show, I'm going, I can't believe this exists.
Before we dive into what to expect for the 90 minutes on Sunday, let's dive a little deeper into just your resume. Climbing the ladder pretty quickly since graduating from Miami. Some folks may know you as a personality with Dan Le Batard, but in terms of your play-by-play background, you mentioned getting to call that first year during the pandemic when it's quiet. What did you feel like was your first breakthrough in play-by-play? I know the Vista Link studios are near your backyard where you get to call some USL games as well as Major League Soccer.
Yeah, so Miami is kind of a fortunate place to be, oddly, if you want to work in the soccer play-by-play industry, because I actually started working with CONCACAF, who are based down here, and they were like working on a project at the time. They were basically like kind of doing archival calls of old CCL finals and old, Gold Cups, and putting together packages to kind of build up their content. And then that didn't come fully to fruition. So the building where they were doing the production out of is actually the same building where BN Sports operates out of. So at the time, they had the rights to the NASL, and my name got kind of tossed around in there. So I actually started doing NASL games probably back in 2015, 2016, something like that. And then I worked there for a few years, and then, once DAZN started in the U.S., that's in the building next to BN Sports. So I worked for them doing a few games. And then a bit southwest of the BN building is the Univision building. And so I got my name got thrown in there. And then, as you mentioned, Vista World Link, which for your listeners who probably are not familiar with what Vista World Link is, it's like kind of the production home of almost all of soccer in the United States. Like, they host video for MLS, they do productions for both USL leagues. The NWSL is done out of there. CONCACAF is done out of there. There's so much stuff that's done. So they just have games on all the time. So I've ended up working at all these places, and now I've kind of stuck with doing mostly Univision's English coverage of MLS, which is usually one game a week. You hear it on SAP, and then doing Inter Miami for their radio coverage. That actually kind of came. I was working at Univision full time, and I didn't think I was going to have time to do Inter Miami, but because of the pandemic, all the schedules changed. So all of a sudden, I was doing their games on radio, and I've been doing them. I think I've only missed 2 broadcasts, and that was because of Univision conflicts. So yeah, I've kind of been all over, yet I haven't gone anywhere in South Florida.
It's the first time that Inter Miami will see Austin. Certainly not the first time you see Austin. Fans familiar with those weekends when Austin may have been just on a Spanish national broadcast. As a result, Twitter then streams your call with TUDN and some of the groups that you mentioned. So you got to be on the call when Brad Stuber shut down the PK from Chicharito against the Galaxy. You were on the call for that June 19th summer grand opening of Q2 Stadium against San Jose. By my count, and we double checked beforehand, you've called at least 3 Austin FC matches, which means outside of the Verde family, I think you may have the honor of calling the most Austin FC matches so far in the club's young history.
Yeah, and that's a genuine honor for me because as we were talking before we started recording this, I love watching Austin. I love that atmosphere and the way that Josh Wolf has the team playing, I think, is incredibly entertaining for the neutral. And so I can understand well at times last year was frustrating, but I thought even, I mean, and they finished, bottom of the league in terms of goals scored. I thought they were still immensely entertaining. The way that they played games in transition, the way that they tried to play. They were trying to beat teams with the ball, with possession going forward. And I think certainly that first game against Cincinnati is a positive indication that they figured out other areas of the pitch. But I think the building blocks are there for a decent team. And I was kind of surprised to hear that maybe in the run-up to the season, that kind of national perception was that this isn't quite a playoff team just yet. And I'm not just saying this because they beat Cincinnati, a team who will obviously need to do a fair bit of recovery from where they've started their MLS life. I think Austin have a real chance to make the playoffs. And it's because I enjoy watching them every week. I like some of their talent. And I'm really looking forward to seeing their progression this year, both at the weekend against Inter Miami and in the games I do for Univision and TUDN as well.
Well, it's clear that no matter what the projections have been from the national sports writer, the national TV audience still very much wants to see Austin FC. We're going to have quite a few games that will be picked up, including this Sunday against Inter Miami when your hometown side comes over to the state capital here in Texas. Right before we dive into Inter Miami, just what's been your most hectic day? Because literally over there in your backyard, you can walk from one booth, step outside into another booth within a span of maybe 2 minutes from wrapping up one match to opening kick from the next and going from one city on the East Coast to another city on the West Coast call.
Yeah, I think there was one time where I was doing a 7 p.m. game that was in Charlotte when the USL team, the Independents, and then I had a 10:30 game in Orange County, which again is right down the hall. So the 7 p.m. then has a lightning delay. And so we're thinking we either got to abandon ship from the first game and then go do the second. My partner, Gary Baylor, was like, okay, why don't you head over to the second game so that you can at least start the broadcast and then I'll join you, or vice versa. And it ended up working out that the lightning delay ended just in time to where a 7 p.m. game with the lightning delay ended like at 10:18. And then we ran down the hall, threw our lineups together, and we were on the air at 10:30. Actually, like an average weekend for me usually involves me doing the Univision game that'll kick off at 3:50. It'll be done at 5:50, and then I race up to Inter Miami Stadium. I'll get into the stadium at 6:30 for 7 p.m. Pregame show, and then we're on the air at 8. So I'm basically going all the way from 3:50 until 10. So yeah, it can get pretty chaotic, and it's funny because to the viewer, it seems like you've gone from down the hall. And actually, I mean, there's a few times at Univision where you have the 6 p.m. and an 8 p.m. and I'm doing both games. So it's literally from the moment that the 6 p.m. game ends, I'm rushing down the hall just to sit in the chair, never mind actually have everything in front of me. So yeah, there's definitely some chaotic times, and some viewers might think that I'm teleporting, but it's because I'm calling a game off television from one hallway down to another.
We know what we've signed up for. We wouldn't have it any other way. We're fortunate in Austin to have some studios. I was calling track and field in Birmingham about an hour before we kicked back on Saturday live in Austin at Q2 Stadium. So let's dive in. Inter Miami, of course, David Beckham. Everybody speculated that he'd probably want a franchise in Miami. Part of his clause when he first came to the Galaxy years ago, 2018, that was confirmed that you all would kick off in 2020. You didn't know there'd be a pandemic. But how have you seen this team grow over the first couple of years? And what was, do you think, the most optimistic view of this year's team with 14 new players coming in?
So I think the development over time is obviously probably not what the club would have wanted it to be. I think this team had high ambitions. They did make the playoffs in year one, but it's because the field was expanded to 10 teams. They lost to Nashville in the opening round, and I think Nashville not only has kind of led the race of the teams that came in that year, but is honestly becoming like one of the best expansion teams of all time when you consider how good and solid they've been for their first 2 years now of existence. We'll see what it's like when they move to the Western
Exactly.
Right. So I think Miami last year they brought through a couple of different players, but it mostly locked in their build for the first 2 years. And the decision was made by Phil Neville and Chris Anderson, the sporting director. This needs to change, and it can't just be a small change. And frankly, I think that's bold, right? Because you look at some of the players that were in the Inter Miami team, even where they've gone since, right? Nicolas Figal went to Boca Juniors. Leandro Gonzalez Pires not only won an MLS Cup, but then went to River Plate. Those are the two Argentinian giants. Rodolfo Pizarro went back to Monterrey, who have probably been one of the biggest giants in Mexico and in CONCACAF. You think of the Champions Leagues that they've won. There's some players with some real pedigree, and you can go, oh, if we just figure it out, get the right formula, and all of a sudden we can let those guys kind of fly. But that hasn't necessarily been the case. And so they decided to go again. And I think the lesson that was probably learned is I think Phil Neville talked a lot about Nashville, frankly, as a team that doesn't get beat every week. They're hard to beat. They drew whatever it is 17, 18 times last season. And I think he kind of saw that as, okay, what we need to start with is hard to beat. Because I think a few times Miami would go 1-0 down and then the game would get away from them. And so what this year's team is going to be is about being solid and then trying to find areas either in the counterattack or when they get good moments, particularly at home, to get forward and being more clinical in front of goal. So I think that's kind of the template, and we saw it against Chicago. Yes, the Miami keeper Clement Diop had to make some big saves, but for the most part, the concern, particularly in the first 45 minutes, was can we maintain our shape? When we give up chances, can we not put our heads down? And that's exactly what happened. It was a 0-0 draw, but I think you started to see some of what, at the very least, the foundation is for Inter Miami, which is don't get beat, and then we can become an expressive, forward-facing team that's trying to press and get a high up the field and keep possession, a lot of the aspirational things not only teams in MLS, but frankly, this club is hoping to be.
Yeah, what fans saw in South Florida in that home opener this last weekend was a new face on the team. Literally 9 of the 11 starters new to the team. Of course, the fresh pink threads as well, 16,000 strong, abundance of optimism. Let me walk you through defense, midfield up top, just kind of what stands out to you. Again, a scoreless draw against Fire. I think most folks would say you look good, though, against Chicago, and there's reason for optimism that can travel into Austin on Sunday. But just in that back line, what do the fans know they have as a constant from one week to the next now?
So one thing that you started to see, particularly as the game went along, was what DeAndre Yedlin's impact is going to be, brought over from Galatasaray on a free, and frankly brings an element to Miami's team that they have not had in their first 2 years, which is just pure raw pace. Both him and Ari Lassiter, who came on as a sub, who used to play in Houston, just brought that in abundance. And it's just something that Miami hasn't really had. So Yedlin's impact was felt on a few occasions. They're still kind of getting acquainted with playing in a back five. He has played a lot in a back four over the course of his career. Yeah, he has some experience in different systems, but I think the way that he kind of expressed himself, got forward, and created some counterattacking moments was huge. So I think you have DeAndre Yedlin as a key factor. Noah Allen made his debut. We'll see how long he continues to feature. 17 years of age, the first academy player to start for the team, and he, I thought, really held his own, despite the fact that he's only 17 years of age. And then you have three new center backs: Chris McVeigh, Damian Lowe, Jairo Quinteros, who was in Bolivia the last couple of years, actually came through at Valencia while Phil Neville was there with his brother Gary. So I thought Chris McVeigh, a really solid passer of a ball. You can see the vision that he has, and he was kind of heralded with some technical quality when he came in. So an entirely new defense in a back five system with a new goalkeeper as well, Clement Diop, although he was training with the team for the last half of last season. He came in and made some really big saves, kept a clean sheet, and I thought kept the team ticking. So an entirely new back line, and there was a couple of standouts in there.
Had to have made one of the co-owners, of course, David Beckham, smile when he did see the 17-year-old Noah Allen make that climb from MLS Next Pro, showing there is, in fact, a path to the first team in MLS, as he got the start in place of Breck Shea, even though just being added hours from what it appeared for outsiders to that starting lineup. When you look at the midfield, what was able to take shape for you all in that opener against Chicago?
So, I mean, Gregory is certainly a player who he was there last year, who was, best player on the side last year, eventually earned the captain's armband. You can understand the pedigree that he comes from Brazil with. But I thought his hard tackling needed a complement. It needed a player who can not only play alongside him, but then carry the team forward. And I thought that Jamota was going to be that guy. A new signing. They brought in another Brazilian. He actually came up with Gregory as a youth player, and then they went on their separate ways. Mota has mostly been at Santos for the last few years. So you have a pair of Brazilian midfield players. Gregory is kind of the hard one who's going to put in a tackle. He's going to win the ball back. He's going to patrol that midfield. And then Jamota is a little bit more creative. And I thought in the first half of the game against Chicago, he didn't really express himself in that way. But then in the second half, you started to see a couple of passes, floated balls in behind, and kind of those ideas helping Gonzalo Higuain connect in the build-up. And I thought that he was able to really help the way that central midfield ticked as the game went on. It wasn't perfect for the full 90 minutes, but you can see how that the two of them are going to be a combination. And then the third is going to vacillate. I would not be surprised, given the performance that we saw, if Robert Taylor is the third in that 5-3-2, a new signing that they brought in from Norway. He's Finnish, but he was in Norway last year, and he just brought in a completely different dynamic, getting forward quickly, directly. He was a real impact substitution. I would not be surprised if with that performance he earned his way into the starting lineup in that 5-3-2 setup for Miami.
We'll have to get a scouting report on him from Alex Ring, who knows everything and all things from over there in his home country in Finland. You've already mentioned, again, in the starting lineup out of 11, there were 2 men on the team last year. You mentioned one of them in Gonzalo. A known quantity, and even though it was a scoreless draw in Chicago, again, a reason to be optimistic every 90 minutes that Miami shows up.
Yeah, so with Higuain, it's interesting the way that his shirt number, I think, carries the narrative for him. He went from number 9 to number 10, and I think that does come to show that he is going to play a bigger role as a playmaker. He kind of started to take that on last season, particularly moments when Rodolfo Pizarro was out of the lineup for international duty, for injury, whatever the case may be. He was able to bring about a different dynamic in his game. He's always been about finishing, scoring goals, but he has an incredible range of passing. His ability to switch the point of attack is really impressive, and I thought you saw that in moments in that game against Chicago. He frankly should have gotten an assist because he played a great cross in for Leo Campana, the new center forward for Inter Miami. He had his header come off the crossbar, and I think he's starting to feel a little bit better connection with the players around him, in particular with Ari Lassiter, who came on as a sub in terms of playing him in behind with pace. He played him in behind with pace for one moment. It led to a corner, and he has a good relationship with him. Has talked to him a lot about running into spaces and the spaces that he wants to see him occupy. He combined well with DeAndre Yedlin as well, and you started to see him kind of be the leader, which I think was a key talking point for him out of the season, which is, at times he would get frustrated with his teammates that they frankly are not on his level, right? Like he's a World Cup runner-up. He's been with Real Madrid and Napoli and Chelsea and some of the biggest clubs in the world. He expects a lot of his teammates, and unfortunately, MLS players just aren't of that level week in and week out. And so there was a conversation about him being less visibly frustrated, him being more of a leader, taking this on, and what might be his final season. He's kind of talked about it that way. So I think Higuain moving into that number 10 role, you will see him more involved in the build-up than you might have expected given that he's a number 9. But he's really playing as a second forward right now for the moment alongside Leo Campana.
All right, so before we wrap things up, of course, 90 minutes coming up on Sunday, national audience on ESPN and ESPN Deportes. What can fans in Miami, what do you think they know they can absolutely expect when Miami travels to Austin?
I think we now know that at the very least, Inter Miami will begin the game trying to frustrate Austin. They're going to begin with the ball. They'll have their opportunities to build up, but Miami are going to keep their lines very solid. They're going to basically try and play your way through us, particularly for the first 15 minutes, and then we'll grow into the game. I think you'll see, Austin will have their chances on the ball, but will they be able to break through a team that is solid defensively? They've worked their lines. I can't imagine we'll see a ton of changes on the back line. Maybe Breck Shea will come back. He's been kind of coming his way through injury, so maybe he'll play at that left wing back position, but that back line will mostly stay the same, and the goal will be, let's try and keep the 0 for a few minutes, and then kind of step forward and try and hit on counters, try and find our outlets. I thought Miami, and Phil Neville even said this, we're pretty poor in possession in the first half against Chicago, but eventually grew into the game and got better. So maybe that's better from the start, but at the very least, they know their solidity is there, and I think that's kind of going to be, at the very least, the early season template for Miami. Be solid, try not to get run off the park early in away games, and then try and find your chances. To be fair to Miami, even last year when they didn't make the playoffs, there were moments where away in Atlanta, away in Portland, if they just take one or two of their chances, they could have had vastly different results than they had towards the end of last season. But it's about trying not to get beat early, which they were probably a few too many times last year, and I think that'll be the case in Austin this weekend.
No turnover in the Miami radio booth. You've got Thomas Rongen, who we're both familiar with from his NASL days, wrapped up his coaching career in Tampa with the Rowdies after actually playing in Fort Lauderdale with the Strikers as well. Anything you'd like to share scouting report-wise on your analyst on radio?
Oh, Thomas Rongen is an absolute legend. I would describe him as the Forrest Gump of American soccer. When you hear him tell stories, he has been everywhere. He's told me stories about, coaches or managers that the U.S. has tried to get over the course of time. I'm not sure if I'm at liberty to share them, and so I won't. He's been in rooms, where big decisions are made at MLS level, U.S. soccer level. He talks about his career in the NASL when he was with the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. They actually got relocated to Minnesota, and talks about being in the same room as Prince, being with Johan Cruyff and Franz Beckenbauer in Studio 54 in New York. Like, that guy has experienced so much, and he is such a character. So I absolutely love working with TR, and yeah, we'll do it again all season, and including this weekend against Austin.
Mentioned it is a national audience on ESPN and ESPN Deportes, so no local TV in Miami or in Austin. Remind us where Miami listeners can find you and Coach on the call.
So on Inter Miami digital platforms, whether it's our website, I usually tweet out the link beforehand. Our club will tweet out the link, and then on the club's app as well. So we are a digital operation, and so we ask you to check it out, intermiamicf.com.
Again, Austin fans, you've heard the voice of Chris Wittyngham before on the national call of a handful of matches last year. A Miami audience gets to listen to him year-round. Of course, our call on radio locally in Austin, Alt 97.5 FM, also streaming for free on the iHeartRadio app. And this week, because it is a national game, we'll have the call on Sirius XM FC as well. Chris, great to have a chance to sit down with you. I know your schedule is as hectic as anybody with all the jobs you're juggling. And I know you wouldn't have it any other way. Appreciate your time.
Lincoln, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.